So if you want to create one of the most, heavily tattooed and universally recognized logos in human history, do not hire a marketing agency.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. Don't waste money on focus groups. Don't worry about brand synergy. And definitely do not rent a boardroom.
Yeah, that's the exact opposite of what you want to do here.
Exactly. Just find a guy standing ankle deep in mud at a 1969 rock festival who is just absolutely furious that he can't find his black equipment boxes.
It really is the ultimate anti-branding origin story, isn't it?
It totally is. And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. Today we're digging into the hidden history behind the Grateful Dead's most iconic logos, and specifically the unsung, overlooked artist who actually created them, Bob Thomas.
Yeah, because we spend so much time analyzing, corporate aesthetics, we just assume that because a symbol is globally famous today, it must have been engineered for fame from the very beginning.
Right, like some master plan. But looking through the stack of historical excerpts we have today and these firsthand accounts from the official archives of Owsley-Bear Stanley, the exact opposite is true.
It really is.
Yeah, their visual identity didn't start as art at all. Our mission today is to show how it actually started as a frantic attempt to solve a really annoying everyday logistical problem.
And sitting right at the center of this story is Bob Thomas. He's this invisible, wildly eclectic artist who practically built the visual culture of an entire musical movement.
Mostly by just being in the right place at the right time with a very specific type of brain.
He was the classic unsung hero, just
Yeah.
a synthesizer of history. I mean, he was a guy who could look at a piece of absolute garbage and see a global icon.
Which is wild. And look, if you're listening to this, even if you wouldn't consider yourself a massive Deadhead or even a big fan of 1960s rock, the psychology of how this happened is just fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. It's a masterclass in accidental branding.
Right. Because to understand how Bob Thomas changed music history, we actually have to start with the mechanics of a late 60s music festival, which, if you've seen the archival footage, was just pure, unadulterated chaos.
Total chaos. Disorganized schedules, zero crowd control.
Yeah, a complete nightmare for the people actually trying to put on the show.
The physical reality of touring in 1969 is honestly hard to overstate.
Yeah.
Because today, everything is barcoded.
Oh, yeah, digitally tracked, moved with military precision.
Exactly.
Right.
But back then, touring gear, so like amplifiers, cables, instruments, it was all kept in these heavy, identical black wooden road cases.
Just big black boxes.
Right. Now imagine 5 or 6 different bands sharing the exact same dark, muddy backstage area. You have literally hundreds of these massive black boxes stacked everywhere.
Okay, so it's basically the 1960s rock and roll equivalent of tying a bright red ribbon to your black suitcase at the airport baggage claim.
That is exactly what it was.
Because if you've ever stood at an airport carousel staring at 60 identical black roller bags, just terrified you're going to grab the wrong one, you understand the baseline frustration here.
Yeah, and now multiply that anxiety by 10,000 pounds of sensitive audio equipment.
Right. So what actually happened backstage?
Well, when it was time for the Grateful Dead to set up or pack out, the road crew literally couldn't find the band's gear. It looked exactly like Jefferson Airplane's gear or Janis Joplin's gear.
Just a sea of black boxes.
Exactly. And right in the middle of this headache is Owsley Stanley, who is universally known as Bear. He was the band's brilliant, very eccentric sound engineer.
Okay.
And he finally decides he just cannot deal with the missing boxes anymore. He needs a mark, something highly visible from 50 feet away in the pitch dark.
So what does he do?
He takes a piece of material and physically cuts a stencil. It is pure brutalist function. He sketches a circle, draws a jagged lightning bolt right down the middle, and divides the circle into a red half and a blue half.
With the bolt in stark white, right?
Yes, exactly. And he hands the stencil and some spray paint to the crew so they can go tag every single wooden box they own.
But wait, doesn't this challenge our whole romanticized view of iconic art? The fact that it literally started as a utilitarian fix for misplaced boxes.
Well, what's fascinating here is that necessity is the truest mother of invention. Bear was essentially applying the principles of highway safety to rock and roll equipment.
Highway safety, that makes so much sense.
Right, because the contrasting colors, the red and blue separated by smart white, it creates maximum optical efficiency. It's the exact same reason a stop sign catches your eye.
So he wasn't trying to make some profound statement about the era.
No, not at all. He wasn't thinking about the band's sonic philosophy or anything. He was literally just trying to get the amplifiers onto the truck before it started raining again.
Which is so funny. It makes total sense for a guy managing logistics. But, a red and blue circle with a bolt is a great luggage tag. It's not a legend.
Right. Function alone doesn't create a cultural phenomena.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the timeline shifts. Bear takes this freshly cut, probably still wet stencil, and he shows it to his longtime friend and creative collaborator, Bob Thomas.
And Bob Thomas was deeply, deeply embedded in Bear's world. In fact, he actually worked as Bear's laboratory assistant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And to understand their dynamic, it really helps to understand what kind of lab Bear was running. Bear was a central figure in the counterculture.
He wasn't just doing sound engineering, was he?
No, he was famous for being one of the primary underground chemists manufacturing LSD in the 1960s.
Right. The famous Owsley acid.
Exactly. So this was the environment Thomas was working in. It was a space where extreme technical precision collided daily with massive, mind-altering psychedelic experiences.
Okay, wait. So Bear paints this highly logical, high-visibility circle with a lightning bolt. Functionally, that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
But how does Bob Thomas look at a utilitarian luggage tag and think, you know what this needs? A human skull.
I know, it sounds crazy.
It seems like a massive, incredibly morbid leap to make for a piece of equipment tracking.
It does seem morbid until you look at it through the lens of that specific environment. Thomas possessed a deeply artistic philosophical eye.
Okay.
When Bear shows him the stencil, Thomas doesn't just see a way to find the amps. He looks at the stark geometry and immediately sees a blank canvas that needs an anchor.
Ah, I see.
So by placing a stylized human skull inside that high contrast circle and using the lightning bolt as a dramatic fracture down the skull's face, he changes the entire frequency of the image.
Oh, wow. He takes it from highway signage to something almost ancient.
Exactly.
Uh,
The skull is one of the oldest, most potent symbols in human history. It represents mortality, the unknown.
An ego death. Right.
Crucially, in the context of the psychedelic 1960s, it represents the stripping away of the ego. So when you combine that ancient, somewhat ominous imagery with the vibrant, electrifying jolt of a modern red, white, and blue lightning bolt, it just works.
It captures that mysterious, slightly dangerous spirit surrounding the Grateful Dead perfectly.
It really reflects the music itself, rooted in old, traditional Americana and blues, but electrified and fractured into something totally unprecedented.
I love that. I really do. But even after Thomas paints this incredible skull into the stencil, the band doesn't just look at it and declare it their new corporate logo.
No, not at all.
They didn't even bother to give it a name. Looking at the historical accounts, the band and the crew just vaguely referred to it as the Grateful Dead logo for years.
Just a completely generic name.
Yeah. They had absolutely no idea the cultural monster they had just birthed. It was just spray painted on boxes, stamped on gear, existing out in the wild.
And that lack of preciousness is honestly the secret ingredient to its success.
Because it wasn't forced on anyone.
Right. Because it wasn't burdened by marketing expectations or some rigid brand rollout. It belonged to the environment.
Yeah.
Thomas's addition of the skull added profound depth, shifting it from a label to an emblem, like a flag for the community. But you're right, it didn't truly become immortal until the fans gave it a name.
Right, because the name it eventually got, the name everyone knows today, is the Steal Your Face logo, or just the Steely.
Steely, yeah.
But the origin of that phrase is wild. It involves a real-life betrayal and a massive psychological shift in meaning from the audience.
It does. The phrase "steal your face" originates from a lyric in the song He's Gone, which the band debuted in 1972. The specific line is, "Steal your face right off your head."
Now, if you hear that out of context while looking at a skull with a lightning bolt through it, it sounds incredibly psychedelic.
Oh, totally.
Like some intense, ego-dissolving journey into the cosmos. But the reality is so much more grounded. It's actually a bit cynical, honestly.
Yeah, it's very literal.
The band wrote that lyric about their former manager, Lenny Hart.
Right. Lenny Hart was the father of the band's drummer, Mickey Hart. And Lenny had severely abused his position of trust.
What exactly did he do?
He embezzled a substantial amount of the band's money. It was a devastating financial blow. And then he completely disappeared.
Just vanish.
He literally took their money and ran. So the song He's Gone was written as a way for the band to process that intense betrayal.
Okay, let's unpack this. Steal your face right off your head was their poetic, bitter way of describing a con man.
Exactly. Someone robbing you blind while looking you right in the eye.
Okay, hold on. This timeline is wild to me. So they wrote a song about a guy literally stealing their money, their retirement fund, basically.
Yes.
And the fans decided to take that lyric and use it as a badge of honor for getting their minds blown by the music. How does that psychological leap even happen?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand that leap, you have to put yourself in the audience at a Grateful Dead show in the early 1970s.
Okay, paint the picture for me.
The fans, who are known as heads, were experiencing these massive improvisational musical jams. We aren't talking about 3-minute pop songs here.
They were famous for the long sets.
We are talking about 30-minute, unbroken, sensory overload explorations, where the music just seems to dismantle the room around you.
The walls are melting, the guitars are feeding back, the rhythm is totally untethered.
Right. It's a completely overwhelming experience.
Yeah,
And the audience needed a vocabulary to describe that specific feeling.
that makes sense.
They needed words for that euphoric moment when the music completely overtakes your senses and your individual ego just vanishes.
So they grabbed the lyric.
Exactly. They heard the lyric, "Steal Your Face," and they completely stripped it of its original context about Lenny Hart's embezzlement.
They didn't care about the manager.
No, they didn't care about the band's financial drama at all. They cared about what was happening to their brains in the front row. They repurposed "Stealing Your Face" into slang for musical euphoria.
That is incredible. They took a symbol of financial theft and recycled it into an anthem of joy.
Yeah, art takes on a life of its own once released.
It just goes to show that once art leaves the artist's hands, it belongs entirely to the consumer.
And the visual art finally collided with this new fan slang in 1976. The band released a double live album, and they titled it "Steal Your Face." And right there, taking up the entire album cover, was Bob Thomas's skull and lightning bolt design.
So the circuit closes. The fans look at the cover, they look at the title, and from that point forward, Bob Thomas's stylized road case luggage tag officially becomes the Steely.
It solidifies the idea that a brand isn't what the creator dictates, it's what the community adopts.
The band provided the raw materials, the spray-painted artwork, the bitter lyrics, the improvisational music.
Right, but the fans stitched those raw materials together to create the mythology.
Which brings us right back to the man who provided that crucial visual material in the first place. Because Bob Thomas wasn't just a one-hit wonder who sketched a skull on a whim and faded into obscurity.
No, he was incredibly prolific.
Right. To truly understand his genius and why he was the exact right person to elevate Bear's stencil, we have to look at how his brain worked, because it led to his other massive contribution to their imagery.
Right. When you read the first-hand accounts from his friends and collaborators, they describe Bob Thomas as a true borderline obsessive Renaissance man.
He was all over the map.
He really defied easy categorization. He wasn't just an illustrator, he was a classically trained painter. He was a sculptor.
And the sources mention he was a bagpiper.
A very passionate bagpiper. He was a deep lover of Renaissance and Edwardian music and art.
That is quite the mix of interests.
It is. But alongside these deep classical and historical obsessions, he was living in the epicenter of the 1960s counterculture.
Right, the LSD lab.
Exactly. Bear Stanley noted that Thomas had a very rare, highly specific gift. He had the technical ability to authentically paint the intricate, impossible geometric patterns and vivid imagery that people experience during psychedelic states.
Wow. So he could translate the untranslatable?
Yes.
I mean, if you've ever tried to explain a profound dream to someone, you know how frustrating it is when the words fail.
Oh, it's impossible.
But Thomas could take these massive, abstract, mind-bending visual experiences and actually anchor them on a physical canvas so other people could recognize them.
Which is an incredible talent.
It really is. But because his brain couldn't just turn off, his gaze was constantly shifting from the modern psychedelic present to the forgotten relics of the past.
Which leads us to 1973.
Right, 1973, and the creation of arguably their second most famous visual asset.
Yeah.
The Bears.
Yes, the Bears. So in 1973, Thomas was commissioned to create the back cover art for the album History of the Grateful Dead, Volume 1, Bear's Choice.
Okay.
And rather than drawing something from scratch or relying purely on his psychedelic geometry, he went digging into history. He found a small lead printer's ornament sitting in an old, dusty typesetter's box.
Okay, let's do a quick explainer here, because for listeners who grew up in the digital age, a printer's ornament sounds like a PDF file or clip art. What exactly did he find?
Right, so before computers, if you wanted to print a book or a newspaper, you had to physically build the page using heavy little blocks of metal.
Like individual letters.
Exactly. Each letter of the alphabet was a separate piece of lead. A printer's ornament was a specialized block of lead with a tiny image or flourish carved in reverse on the top.
Oh, I see.
The printer would lock it into the press, roll ink over it, and physically smash it into the paper to create a graphic.
Got it.
So Thomas found one of these forgotten heavy little metal blocks, likely from the 19th century, that featured a crude image of a bear.
Doesn't it feel like Thomas was just an absolute sponge for historical oddities? Who else looks at a tiny piece of lead from an old printing press and turns it into one of rock's most famous mascots?
It's brilliant.
He was basically a human DJ, but for visual art. He was sampling a 19th century typesetter's block the same way a hip-hop producer samples an obscure jazz record.
That is a perfect analogy.
He takes this tiny piece of lead, completely remixes it with his knowledge of Edwardian whimsical art, filters it through a modern, vibrant, psychedelic color palette, and draws a line of 5 colorful bears marching across the album cover.
Which raises an important question about how we define the title of artist. He wasn't pulling these bears out of thin air. He was curating history.
He was recontextualizing it.
Yes. And of course, just like with the Steely logo, the minute the art was released, the fans took it and completely ran with it.
Right. The fans look at these colorful, joyful bears stepping along in a line, and they immediately christen them the Dancing Bears.
Which makes sense.
It fit the vibe of the concerts perfectly, everyone spinning and dancing freely in the crowd.
Oh, completely.
But reading through Bear Stanley's archives, Bear was notoriously, almost hilariously pedantic about this.
He really was.
He absolutely hated that people called them dancing bears. According to the sources, he insisted, and I quote, "They are quite obviously those of a high-stepping march."
High-stepping march. It is a brilliant detail because it highlights that ongoing eternal tension between a creator's rigid intent and the audience's emotional interpretation.
Totally.
Bear Stanley sees a structured, high-stepping march, which perhaps reflects its own highly logical, engineering-focused mind.
And highway safety stencil mind.
Exactly. While the fans see a joyous, free-flowing dance reflecting the communal, chaotic vibe of the actual concerts.
But Thomas is the genius who synthesized an image robust enough to hold both of those interpretations simultaneously.
He really was.
It takes a very specific type of brain to connect Scottish bagpipes, Edwardian history, 19th century lead printing blocks, psychedelic geometry, and a spray-painted luggage tag.
It takes a mind that simply does not see the boundaries between disciplines. Because Thomas was a musician himself, he understood on a visceral level what the band's audio was trying to convey.
Right.
Because he was a sculptor and a painter, he understood the mechanics of form, weight, and color. And because he was a close friend and a lab assistant, he intimately understood the weird chemical culture of the scene from the inside out.
He wasn't a hired gun from an ad agency trying to guess what the kids wanted.
No. He was part of the family, translating their shared reality.
So synthesizing all of this, what does this hidden history mean for us, taking this all in decades later? Let's review the actual journey we've just tracked.
Let's do it.
We started in a muddy, chaotic, miserable festival backstage in 1969. We had Ozley-Bear Stanley cutting a highly functional, highly visible circle and lightning bolt into a piece of stencil paper, purely to stop the roadies from losing the band's black wooden equipment boxes in the dark.
And we saw that deeply utilitarian duct tape solution was handed to Bob Thomas, who infused it with thousands of years of human symbolism by adding the skull.
Yeah, we watched as the fans took a bitter lyric about an embezzling manager, "Steal your face," and forcefully attached it to that artwork.
Transforming a story of financial theft into a global symbol of musical ecstasy and ego death.
Exactly. And then we explored how that same artist used his obsessive Renaissance man background to rescue a tiny discarded piece of lead from a 19th century typesetter's box, remixing it into the high-stepping or dancing bears that you can now find on t-shirts in almost every country on Earth.
Through it all, Bob Thomas stands as the invisible thread.
He really does.
He is the unsung creator who didn't just design logos. He built a visual language. The symbols he curated and finalized continue to represent an enduring philosophy of freedom, creativity, and community long after the specific concerts have ended.
It really forces you to reconsider the origins of the things we consider permanent, iconic, or brilliant.
It really does.
We assume that to make a lasting impact on the world, you need a grand, flawless master plan. We think you need the boardroom, the budget, and the engineered synergy.
But the hidden history of Bob Thomas and the Grateful Dead proves that the most profound cultural artifacts are often born from the most mundane, frustrating circumstances.
True enduring art often comes from simply looking at the tools you have in front of you, right? And finding a creative way to solve the problem at hand.
Yeah, just fixing what's broken.
Exactly. So I want to leave you, the listener, with something to mull over today. Take a look around you at the mundane objects in your life right now.
Yeah, look at your own quick fixes.
Think about the practical fixes, the weird workarounds, or the little duct tape solutions you've rigged up just to make your day slightly easier or slightly less annoying.
It's a great thought experiment.
If a crude stencil designed purely to keep track of heavy black luggage in the mud can accidentally evolve into the visual identity of a global movement, what accidental legacy might you be setting in motion today just by trying to solve a simple, everyday problem?
Please click like and then subscribe. Also share this video with your friends. Thank you.